September 30th, 1955. The sun was beginning to dip low over the California horizon, casting long, jagged shadows across the asphalt of Route 466. It was the kind of twilight that plays tricks on the eyes, where the light turns golden and blinding just before it vanishes into the cold blue of evening. The air was dry, filled with the scent of dust and gasoline. On that desolate stretch of highway, near the intersection of Shalem, the silence of the desert was about to be shattered by a sound that would echo through history. It wasn't just the sound of metal tearing against metal. It was the sound of a generation losing its voice. A silver Porsche 550 Spider, low to the ground and built for speed, was screaming down the road. They called it Little Bastard, a name painted on the back in bold script, a name that felt like a taunt. Inside the cockpit, a young man in a white t-shirt gripped the steering wheel. His eyes were squinting against the glare. He was 24 years old. He had the world at his feet. He had contracts, fame, and the adoration of millions waiting for him. But in that moment, all he had was the speed, the wind, the roar of the engine behind his ears. He was immortal, until the moment he wasn't. The crash was violent. It was catastrophic. It was the kind of impact that leaves nothing behind but wreckage and questions. When the dust settled, the silver Porsche was a crumpled ball of aluminum, looking more like a crushed soda can than a high-performance machine. Steam hissed from the broken radiator. Fluids leaked onto the dry pavement, turning the dust into dark, sticky mud. The silence that followed was heavier than the noise. It was a vacuum, a void. The first witnesses to arrive saw a scene of utter devastation. They saw the twisted metal. They saw the shattered glass scattered like diamonds on the road. And they saw the body, broken, still. The face that had just begun to captivate the world was now pale, lifeless, and turning cold. The paramedics arrived too late. The police arrived to measure skid marks that barely existed. They said he died on impact. They said it was quick. But the rumors started before the ambulance even left the scene. They whispered that he was still breathing when they pulled him out. They whispered that his neck was broken, that his body was mangled beyond recognition. They whispered that this wasn't an accident. It was a destiny fulfilled, a prophecy that had been written the moment he was born. News traveled differently back then. There was no internet, no instant feed. It moved through telephone wires and radio waves, slow and heavy. But when the news of James Dean's death hit, it hit like a tidal wave. It started as a murmur in Hollywood, a frantic phone call from a mechanic, a weeping publicist. Then it spread to the newspapers. The headlines were stark. Massive black letters. James Dean Deese, victim of highway crash. Rising star killed. For the teenagers of America, it was impossible to believe. He was their reflection. He was the cool, detached, misunderstood boy who wore a red jacket and leaned against a wall with a cigarette dangling from his lips. He couldn't die. Heroes don't die in car crashes on dusty highways. They fade away. But Dean didn't fade. He vanished in a flash of violence. And in that sudden absence, the myth began to grow. It wasn't just grief. It was hysteria. Girls wept in the streets. Boys revved their engines in tribute. The studios panicked. Warner Brothers had a star who was dead and 2 movies that hadn't even been released yet. They realized, with a cold, corporate calculation, that a dead James Dean might be worth more than a living one. The machinery of fame began to turn, grinding his tragedy into legend. But to understand the crash, you have to understand the driver. You have to go back, before the Porsche, before the cameras, before the name James Dean meant anything to anyone. You have to go back to the flat, frozen plains of Indiana. That's where the coldness started. That's where the loneliness took root. He wasn't born a rebel. He was born a soft, quiet boy named Jimmy. He was close to his mother, unusually close. She was his world. She understood his sensitivity, his art, his imagination. She was the only color in a gray world. And then, when he was just 9 years old, she died. Cancer took her slowly, then all at once. The boy watched her fade. He watched the only person who truly saw him disappear into the earth. And then came the betrayal. The father, the man who was supposed to protect him. He didn't know what to do with a grieving, artistic son. So he put him on a train. He sent him away. He sent his 9-year-old boy back to Indiana, along with the body of his mother. Imagine that train ride. A little boy sitting alone while his mother's casket rode in the cargo hold. The rhythmic clacking of the tracks. The endless miles of darkness. That train ride never ended for James Dean. He spent the rest of his life trying to get off that train, trying to find a home that wouldn't send him away. He grew up on a farm with his aunt and uncle. He was the golden boy of the town on the surface. He played basketball. He acted in school plays. He was polite, but underneath there was a fire burning, a rage, a sense of abandonment that he couldn't articulate. He felt different. He felt alien. He would wander the fields at night, screaming at the stars, demanding answers that never came. He learned to wear masks. He learned that if he smiled, people liked him. If he acted tough, people respected him. But if he showed them the broken boy inside, they would leave him, just like his father did. So he hid the boy. He buried him deep, and he built a fortress around his heart. He started to chase adrenaline. He rode motorcycles too fast on dirt roads. He took risks that made other boys flinch. He discovered that when he was moving fast, when he was on the edge of control, the pain in his chest subsided. The speed was a drug. It was the only thing that could drown out the silence of that train ride. When he finally escaped Indiana and headed for Hollywood, he wasn't looking for fame. He was looking for validation. He wanted to be seen. He wanted someone to look at him and not look away. But Hollywood is a cruel machine. It eats sensitive boys for breakfast. He started at the bottom. Commercials. Bit parts. He was just another pretty face in a town drowning in pretty faces. But he had something the others didn't. He had an intensity that was almost frightening. When he walked into a room, the air changed. He didn't act like he wanted the job. He acted like he didn't care if he lived or died. And that indifference, that dangerous nonchalance was magnetic. Directors saw it. Producers saw it. They saw a raw nerve. They saw a boy who was bleeding on the inside, and they knew that blood would sell tickets. But the early days were hard. He starved. He slept in cars. He hustled. And there were whispers, dark whispers about what he had to do to survive. The casting couches. The older men with power. The secrets that Hollywood keeps buried in the hills. They said he sold pieces of his soul to get a foot in the door. And maybe he did. Maybe he felt he had nothing left to lose. He eventually made his way to New York. The actor's studio. This was the temple of a new style. The method. It wasn't about pretending. It was about being. It was about digging into your own trauma and dragging it out into the light. For Dean, this was dangerous. He had so much trauma buried. But he dove in. He let the teachers rip him open. He used the pain of his mother's death. He used the anger at his father. He used the loneliness of the farm. And when he performed, it was explosive. It was uncomfortable to watch. He mumbled. He twitched. He turned his back to the audience. He broke every rule of classical acting. But you couldn't take your eyes off him. He was real. In a world of plastic smiles and rehearsed lines, James Dean was messy, ugly, beautiful reality. He was the embodiment of the post-war generation. The kids who had seen the world burn and didn't trust the adults who burned it. He was their voice. Then came East of Eden. Elia Kazan, the legendary director, was looking for someone to play Cal Trask. The bad son. The rejected son. The son who just wanted his father to love him. When Kazan met Dean, he didn't like him. He thought he was arrogant, sullen, a brat. But then he saw him with his father. He saw the tension, the desperate need for approval. And he knew this wasn't acting. This was biography. He cast him, and the set became a battlefield. Dean didn't follow instructions. He wouldn't memorize his lines perfectly. He would stay up all night and come to set exhausted just to look the part. He fought with the older actors. He drove everyone crazy. But when the cameras rolled, magic happened. There's a scene in the movie where Cal tries to give his father money, and the father rejects it. In the script, Cal was supposed to turn and walk away. But Dean didn't walk away. In the moment, overwhelmed by the rejection, he lunged at the actor playing his father. He grabbed him. He hugged him desperately, sobbing, clinging to him like a drowning man. The director kept the cameras rolling. The shock on the other actor's face was real. The pain was real. It was one of the most powerful moments in cinema history. and it was just James Dean begging his own father to love him. The movie wasn't even out yet, and the buzz was building. The studios knew they had a star, but they also knew they had a problem. Dean was uncontrollable. He bought a motorcycle. He raced it through the canyons of Hollywood at night. He got into fights. He dated actresses he wasn't supposed to date. He disappeared for days. He was a publicist's nightmare. He hated the press. He hated the interviews. He would show up to red carpet events in jeans and a t-shirt, unshaven, looking at the photographers with contempt. He called Hollywood a town of phonies. He said he was just a farmer who happened to act. But the more he pushed them away, the more they wanted him. The rebellion was the brand. They packaged his defiance and sold it to the masses. He became the poster boy for the misunderstood. But he wasn't trying to be a symbol. He was just trying to breathe. Then came Rebel without a cause. If East of Eden was his diary, Rebel was his manifesto. The red jacket, the white t-shirt, the blue jeans. It became the uniform of the teenager. The character, Jim Stark, was closer to Dean than Cal Trask. Jim Stark was a boy trying to be a man in a world that wouldn't show him how. The director, Nicholas Ray, understood Dean. He let him improvise. He let him shape the character. There's a scene where Dean hits a desk in frustration. He hits it so hard he could have broken his hand. That wasn't in the script. That was the rage, the bottled-up fury of a lifetime. And the knife fight scene, the tension, the danger. It felt real because for Dean, life was a knife fight. He was always on guard, always waiting for the cut. The cast bonded. They became a strange, dysfunctional family. Natalie Wood, Sal Mineo. They looked up to Dean. He was the leader, the Pied Piper of the Lost Boys. But there was a darkness hanging over the set, a feeling that they were capturing lightning in a bottle, and the bottle was about to shatter. During the filming of Rebel, Dean's obsession with speed grew. He started racing cars seriously. He bought a Porsche Speedster. He entered local races and won. He loved the precision of it. On a movie set, you have to wait. You have to compromise. You have to deal with other people's egos. But in a race car, it's just you and the machine. If you make a mistake, you pay. If you're good, you win. It was honest. It was pure. The studio was terrified. They put clauses in his contracts forbidding him from racing during production. They tried to ground him, but you can't ground a storm. He would sneak out. He would drive fast on the public roads just to feel the G-force. He told his friends that he didn't expect to live past 30. He said it casually, like he was talking about the weather. He felt the clock ticking. He felt the shadow creeping up behind him. He was living in fast forward, trying to cram a whole life into a few short years. His final film was Giant, a massive epic about Texas soil. He played Jet Rink, a poor ranch hand who strikes it rich and becomes a bitter, drunken tycoon. It was a stretch. He had to age on screen. He had to play a man in his 50s. He grayed his hair. He shaved his hairline. He wore prosthetics. And he pulled it off. He showed the world he wasn't just a kid in a red jacket. He was a character actor, a chameleon. But the production was a nightmare. He clashed with the director, George Stevens. Stevens was strict, meticulous. Dean was chaotic, instinctive. They hated each other. Dean would show up late. He would mumble his lines so badly they had to dub them later. He would urinate on the set in front of everyone just to shock them. He was unraveling. The pressure was getting to him. The fame was a cage, and he was thrashing against the bars. He finished his scenes for Giant with a sense of relief. He was free. The studio ban on racing was lifted the moment production wrapped. He had a new car on order, the 550 Spider, the little bastard. He picked up the car in late September. It was a beast, a race car barely legal for the street. It was light, powerful, and unforgiving. He took it to a custom painter. He had the number 130 painted on the doors and hood. He had Little Bastard painted on the back. He showed it off to everyone. He was proud of it, but there were warnings. Strange, ominous warnings. He showed the car to Alec Guinness, the British actor, outside a restaurant in Hollywood. Guinness looked at the car and felt a chill. He told Dean, "If you get in that car, you'll be found dead in it by this time next week." Dean just laughed. He thought it was superstitious nonsense. He brushed it off, but the prophecy hung in the air. 7 days. That's what Guinness said, and the clock started ticking. On the morning of September 30th, Dean woke up early. He was excited. He was heading to Salinas for a race. He was supposed to tow the Porsche on a trailer behind his station wagon. His mechanic, Rolf Wutherich, was with him. They set off, but the Porsche needed miles on the engine. It needed to be broken in. Dean made a decision. He told the stuntman driving the station wagon that he would drive the Porsche. He wanted to feel the road. He wanted to get used to the handling. They unhitched the trailer. Dean slid into the driver's seat of the Spider. Rolf got in the passenger seat. The station wagon followed behind. It was a beautiful day. The sky was endless. They hit the road. The drive was fast. Too fast. Outside of Bakersfield, a police officer saw this silver blur. He pulled him over. Dean was clocked doing 65 in a 55 zone. He got a ticket. He signed it with a smirk. He didn't care. A ticket was just a piece of paper. He was James Dean. He was invincible. He told the officer he wouldn't do it again. But the moment the cop was out of sight, the foot went back down. The engine roared. They continued north. The sun began to sink. The light turned that treacherous gold. The station wagon fell behind. Dean and Rolf were alone on the highway. They were flying. The wind whipped their faces. Dean was in his element. He was happy. Witnesses said he looked calm, focused. He was doing what he loved. He was running away from the world, 1 mile at a time. Then came the intersection, Route 466 and Route 41, a Y shape in the road. A Ford Tudor sedan, heavy and slow, was approaching from the opposite direction. The driver was a student named Donald Turnipseed. He was turning left. He looked down the road. He saw the emptiness. He didn't see the low, silver bullet coming at him. The Porsche was the color of the pavement in the twilight. It blended in. It was invisible. Dean saw the Ford. He saw it starting to turn across his lane. He had milliseconds. His mechanic, Rolf, shouted a warning. Dean didn't brake. He didn't swerve. He reportedly said, "That guy's got to stop. He'll see us." Those were the last words he ever spoke. An assumption, a belief that the world would get out of his way. But the Ford didn't stop. It kept turning. The gap closed. The physics took over. The impact was deafening. The Porsche hit the front of the Ford. The Spider, so light and fragile, disintegrated. It flipped into the air. It spun like a top. It landed in a gully off the side of the road. The Ford slid to a halt. Turnipseed walked away with a scratched nose. Rolf, the mechanic, was thrown from the car. He survived, but he was broken. Jaw crushed. Leg shattered. But Dean was trapped. The steering wheel had crushed his chest. His neck had snapped. His foot was still jammed on the accelerator. The car hissed. The steam rose. The legend was born in the twisted wreckage. The first people on the scene tried to help. They couldn't do anything. The life was gone. The rebel was dead. The funeral was in Indiana. They brought him back to the farm, back to the place he tried to escape. Thousands of people lined the streets. They stripped the souvenir shops of anything with his face on it. The hysteria was absolute. Girls tried to jump into the grave. They tore at their clothes. It was a circus, a macabre carnival of grief. His father stood there, silent. The man who had put him on the train now watched him go into the ground. The circle was closed, but the story didn't end with the burial. It was just beginning, because the car, the little bastard, it wasn't done. The wreckage was salvaged. It was bought by a man who wanted to tour it as a safety exhibit, a warning to teenagers. But strange things started to happen. Dark things. They say the car was cursed. When they tried to unload it from a truck, it slipped. It fell on a mechanic and broke his legs. Then, parts of the car were sold off. The engine went to a doctor who raced cars. He put it in his vehicle. He died in a crash the first time he raced it. The transmission went to another driver. He crashed and was seriously injured. Tires from the little bastard were sold. They blew out simultaneously, causing a wreck. The shell of the car, the twisted frame, was put on display. One night, the garage where it was stored caught fire. Everything burned to the ground, except the car. The car sat there in the ashes, untouched by the flames. It was as if the devil himself was protecting it. Or maybe the devil was trapped inside it. The stories got wilder. People claimed that if you took a photo of the wreckage, you could see Dean's face in the twisted metal. They said the car moved on its own at night. Eventually, the wreckage disappeared. It was being transported on a truck, and when the truck arrived at its destination, the trailer was empty. The car was gone. vanished into thin air. To this day, no one knows where the little bastard is. It's out there somewhere, waiting. A ghost machine, a vessel of death. The mystery of the missing car only added fuel to the fire. Was it stolen? Was it destroyed? Or did it simply leave this dimension, taking the last piece of James Dean with it? And then there were the rumors about Dean himself. That he didn't die, that he was disfigured and hidden away in a sanitarium, that the government faked his death, that he was a spy. The public couldn't accept that he was just gone. They needed a conspiracy. They needed a reason. Because if James Dean could die, then youth could die, cool could die, hope could die. But the truth was simpler and far more tragic. He was just a boy who drove too fast because he was running from ghosts, a boy who wanted a father and got a crowd instead, a boy who looked for love in the lens of a camera and found immortality in a pile of scrap metal. His movies were released after his death. Rebel Without a Cause came out less than a month after the crash. Audiences sat in the dark and watched a ghost. They saw him laugh, cry, and bleed. It was a seance. Every screening was a memorial service. He was more alive on that screen than anyone in the audience. He was frozen in time. He would never get old. He would never get fat. He would never sell out. He would always be 24. He would always be in that red jacket. He would always be the beautiful, broken boy. This is the tragedy of his fame. He had to die to become perfect. He became a saint of the disaffected, a martyr for the moody. His face was printed on t-shirts, posters, coffee mugs. He became a commodity. The industry that he hated, the industry that he mocked, devoured him whole and sold the bones. But watch the movies closely. Look past the icon. Look at the eyes. There is a sadness there that isn't acting. There's a fear. He knew. Deep down, he knew. He lived his life like a man who was late for an appointment with destiny. The recklessness wasn't bravery. It was fatalism. He flirted with death until death finally flirted back. And when it did, he didn't blink. The crash on Route 466 wasn't an accident. It was a conclusion. A final scene in a movie that had been writing itself since the day his mother died. Even today, decades later, the fascination remains. People still visit the crash site. They leave flowers, cigarettes, sunglasses. They leave notes for Jimmy. They stand on the side of the road and listen to the wind, hoping to hear the echo of that Porsche engine. The intersection has been changed, the road widened, but the energy is still there. It's a scar on the landscape, a haunted patch of asphalt where the 20th century lost its innocence. James Dean isn't just an actor anymore. He is a feeling. He is that moment when you are young and angry and scared and you don't know why. He is the speed limit you break just to feel something. He is the cigarette you smoke in the dark. He is the secret you keep from your parents. He is the rebel in all of us, forever young, forever beautiful, and forever doomed. So when you look at that black and white photo, the one where he's walking in the rain in Times Square, huddled in his coat, remember this. You aren't looking at a star. You're looking at a survivor who didn't survive. You're looking at tragedy wrapped in charisma. He gave us everything he had. He gave us his pain. He gave us his anger. And in the end, he gave us his life. The myth of James Dean is a hungry thing. It feeds on our nostalgia. It feeds on our desire for eternal youth. But the man named Jimmy, he's still back there on that train in Indiana, alone in the dark, waiting for someone to come and take him home. And maybe, just maybe, in that final split second before the lights went out on Route 466, he finally found it. The silence, the peace, the end of the ride. The conspiracy theories will never die because we don't want them to. We need the mystery. We need the curse of the little bastard to make sense of the senseless. If the car was cursed, then it wasn't his fault. It wasn't his recklessness. It was supernatural. It absolves him. It makes him a victim of dark forces rather than a victim of his own heavy foot in a blind intersection. It keeps the story magical. But the mechanic knew. Rolf Wutherich, the man who survived, the man who was thrown into the dirt. He never spoke much about it. He drifted into obscurity. He was haunted by that day. He tried to kill himself multiple times. He eventually died in a car crash decades later in Germany. Another victim of the curse, or just a man who couldn't outrun the memory of that silver blur. The passenger seat was empty, but But the weight of that day never left him. He carried the truth that it wasn't a curse. It was just physics, just two cars occupying the same space at the same time, and a sun that was too bright. And what the other driver? Donald Turnipseed, the college student in the Ford, the man who killed James Dean. He vanished. He refused interviews. He lived a quiet life, running an electrical business. He never spoke of it. He carried that burden in silence until he died. Can you imagine? Every time he saw a poster, every time he saw a clip on TV, he saw the face of the man he destroyed. He became a ghost in his own life. The crash created two ghosts that day, one who became famous and one who became invisible. They were linked forever by twisted chrome and shattered glass. The villain and the hero, cast in a tragedy neither of them auditioned for. Warner Brothers made millions. The estate of James Dean makes millions. The image is licensed, cropped, filtered, and sold. But the essence of the man is lost in the commerce. We forget that he was nearsighted. We forget that he played the bongo drums. We forget that he loved magic tricks. We forget the human details that made him Jimmy. We only see the symbol, the rebel. And perhaps that is the ultimate tragedy. He wanted to be understood deeply and truly. He used the method to show his true self. And instead, he became a poster, a two-dimensional surface for us to project our own fantasies onto. We didn't listen to him. We just watched him. And we are still watching. The sun sets on Sholam every night, just like it did in 1955. The traffic rushes by. Trucks, sedans, SUVs. People checking their phones, listening to podcasts, oblivious to the history beneath their tires. But sometimes when the light is right and the heat waves shimmy off the pavement, you can almost see it. A silver flash, a low rumble, a ghost racing toward the horizon, forever trying to beat the sunset. Forever young, forever fast, forever gone. James Dean didn't just die. He ascended. He became the patron saint of the crash, the beautiful disaster. And as long as there are young men with fast cars and broken hearts, he will never truly be dead. He will be right there in the passenger seat, whispering, faster, faster. They can't catch us if we're gone. But they did catch him. The world caught him, and it never let go. The wreckage of the Porsche may be missing, but the wreckage of the man is everywhere. It's in the way we worship celebrity. It's in the way we consume tragedy. It's in the way we look for meaning in the meaningless. James Dean was the first rock star of cinema. He lived fast, died young, and left a beautiful corpse. And we have been picking over the bones ever since. The final curtain fell on Route 466, but the applause has never stopped. It echoes in the empty canyon of our culture, a hollow sound for a hollow myth. The boy from Indiana is gone. Only the ghost remains. And the ghost is driving a Porsche 550 Spyder heading straight for you.